Today, we're going to be diving deep into my bike setup on my custom-built Commencal FRS. I've spent about 6 weeks riding this bike now, and as a result of my time on the FRS, I've had a few key takeaways in regards to bike sizing and cockpit setup, which we will discuss later in the video. Overall, the FRS has been a really great stepping stone for me, as previously I've spent a ton of time riding only the YT2s. So this is my first downhill bike after 3 years of only riding one other model. And it's been a really great bike, and it's given me a lot of clarity in regards to how I want to set up my future downhill bikes moving forwards. So let's get into the bike check. Prior to building up this FRS, I had spent 3 seasons of riding the YT2s. I had that bike in the size medium, which had a reach of 429 millimeters, and I had that bike in the size large, which had a reach of 452 millimeters. Now, the size medium of that bike gave me amazing leverage over the front end and was great on jumps because of that. However, the shorter wheelbase didn't give me quite the confidence I was looking for in steep terrain. On the other hand, the size large gave me great confidence in steep terrain, but it did not provide me with the same amount of leverage, which made jumps and tricks like 360s a little bit more difficult at times. So that was my base of knowledge that I was leveraging when it came time to pick a size of the FRS. For this bike, I looked at the size small, which has a reach of 440 millimeters, and I looked at the size medium, which has a reach of 465 millimeters. I think the size small would have been the easy and more logical answer, to be honest with you, as it's kind of in between the reaches of the 2 YTs that I had, and maybe would have been the best of both worlds of those 2 bikes. However, I'm always looking to kind of get some new experience under my belt and ride different sizes of bikes just to improve my knowledge and feel. So I went for the size medium with the 465 mil reach. In addition, I knew that I was building up this bike right before the summer when I'd be riding a lot of bike parks. I wouldn't be at home in Southern Utah doing as many tricks. So I thought it was kind of a safe bet to maybe ride a bike that I wouldn't get along with right away. So that was everything that informed my decision to pick the size medium FRS. With all that background information out of the way, how does the size medium actually feel out there on the trail? Well, in my opinion, it definitely feels on the big side, but that doesn't tell the whole story. So when I first built this bike up, I only had 2 days to ride it before I had a film shoot, so I really needed to get comfortable straight away. I had the Bomber Air mounted up in the back, and I had the flip chip in the sensitive setting. I was really happy with how the bike was performing, and I was also really happy with how I was looking in the shots. However, as soon as the film shoot wrapped up, I definitely felt that there could be a little bit more performance extracted from the bike with the coil shock, so I got to fiddling, as I always do. When I first began testing the coil, I started out with a 500-pound spring, and I tested that in both flip chip settings, so sensitive and responsive, and I was definitely oversprung. It was not giving me the performance I had hoped for. So then I dropped down to the 450-pound spring, and I started out in the sensitive setting, and it felt really, really nice. It gave me that, classic coil suppleness that everyone knows and loves. Well, I guess you don't know and love it if you've not ridden a coil, but they feel really great off the top because there's less friction than an air shock. And then out of curiosity, I decided to flip the bike into the responsive setting, and that's when I really found the back end of this bike to come alive. It gave me amazing mid-stroke support while still maintaining the suppleness of the coil. And I would say just the day that I tossed the 450-pound spring on and then flipped it over to the responsive was the day I really started to fully enjoy this bike and thought that I was getting close to its true potential out there on the trail. So all good things, right? Suppleness from the coil shock, mid-stroke support from the responsive flip chip setting. What more could you ask for? Well, given that the responsive flip chip setting provides a very good amount of mid-stroke support, it was keeping the bike higher in the travel and in a slightly more lengthened state from what I was feeling out there on the trail. I don't have any data acquisition from the suspension to actually back up this claim, but it definitely made the bike ride a little bit longer, in my opinion, than I experienced with the air shock in the sensitive setting. So I was struggling a bit with my cockpit feel, so let's take a look at what I'm running. Before we drop in and take a glance at my cockpit setup here, if you're enjoying the video, please consider giving it a like. And if you enjoy bike setup videos just like this one, please consider subscribing for future uploads. So when I decided to go with the medium FRS, I knew it was going to be on the big side, and I tried my best to set up my cockpit accordingly. So a few things that I did to bring the bars closer to me and shorten the cockpit feel are I dropped the fork as low in the crowns as I could to increase the ride height. I'm also running a 15 mil spacer underneath my top crown, and I've got 5 mil spacers beneath my stem. But one area where I kind of messed up is I've only got the 20 mil rise Race Face Atlas handlebar in here, which is not exactly ideal. To be honest, I packed most of these parts in a big box and drove from Utah to Colorado where I built this bike, and I think I may have grabbed the wrong handlebar. I think a 35 mil rise bar would really improve my feel and experience on this bike, but I'll experiment with that when I get home in a few weeks' time. But overall, the cockpit feels good, just a bit longer than I am accustomed to. And there is one other small thing I've done to my fork actually to improve my cockpit feel. So let's take a look at that. So up front on this bike, we have the Bomber 58 from Marzo, the red color looking mint with the red wheel decals. And when I first built up this bike and had the Bomber Air in the rear, I had the fork set up with 5 volume spacers, 65 PSI. I had the damper 2 clicks from open and the rebound 3 clicks from open. So that was feeling good. Was really happy with it. However, when I switched to the coil shock and tossed the bike in the responsive setting, as it began to ride higher in the stroke, it put more weight on the front end of the bike and my active ride height was dropping. So I decided to go up 5 PSI, up to 70 PSI in the fork, and that really helped regain a bit of the confidence over the front end of the bike for me, just because it increased my active ride height of the fork. And that is something that you can definitely think about if you're struggling with front end feel, is changing your fork pressure can change where it's riding in the stroke. That'd be your dynamic sag, and it can really just impact your overall confidence on the bike. One additional thing that I wanted to note about my fork setting change is that I did try to increase my ride height by using just the damping and leaving my air pressure, and I wasn't as happy with the feeling I got from that. So I decided to increase my air pressure by the 5 PSI as I've mentioned, and I've left all of my other settings the same. So my final fork setup for this bike is 70 PSI, 2 clicks from open on the compression and 3 clicks from open on the rebound. There's not one setup that works for everybody, but I just figured I'd toss all my settings up on the screen right now. And in addition to that, I thought it was worth noting that overall, this bike is pretty dang stiff compared to what I've rode here at Trestle and other bike parks in the past. And I think part of the reason that I'm able to get away with that is 1, the coil shock being so supple off the top, and 2, the aluminum FRS frame. I've only rode carbon downhill bikes for the most part over the last 2 to 3 years. And this bike has a way more damped feel. I'm really sensitive to small bump sensitivity and vibration on the bike, and the damped feel has been something that I think I'm enjoying. I don't have any real conclusive thoughts right now on carbon versus aluminum frames, but I think because the aluminum frame provides that damped feel, I'm able to get away with running this stiffer suspension setup than I have in the past. Now that we've taken a look at the suspension, let's take a look at the rest of the bike before we dive in to discussing how everything that I've learned from this FRS will impact my future downhill bike setups. So for wheels, we have the Race Face Atlas aluminum wheels with the red decals looking mint, and mounted up to those, we got Maxxis tires, DHR2 rear, Assegai front, DH casing for both of those. We've got all the Saint parts on here, Saint cranks, derailleur, got a Shimano chain guide. We're running Race Face Atlas flat pedals as of today, but I do go back and forth between this pedal and the Shimano Saint clipless offering as well. And then for the brakes, we have the XTR levers mounted up to the Saint calipers. That's a fun new thing that I've been testing out on this bike, and I've been having an absolute blast. These are probably the best brakes I've ever had. We've got those with 200 mil rotors and resin pads. And then for final touches, we have the Chester grips from Race Face. These are amazing, and the Title JS1 seat. With all that we have discussed in this video, how will I take what I've learned and apply it moving forwards? Well, I think I'm gonna build up 2 downhill bikes. I view the first bike as a trick-oriented bike with a reach in the range of 430 to 440 millimeters. That bike will be dual 27.5 and a single crown meant for bar spins and tail whips. The second bike I view as a mullet bike, so 27.5, 29, and somewhere in the reach range of 455 to 465 millimeters. This is a little bit extra, but I think that this is definitely going to be what I need to ride to my full potential moving forwards. In the Commencal lineup, this would kind of look like a small FRS with a new Super Z mounted up front, and then a medium Commencal Supreme as the mullet bike. So that's kind of how that ideal setup would look like. And for now, this medium FRS kind of falls in between those two ideals. It's full 27.5, but it is the bigger bike. And I would say, in my opinion, this would kind of be the ideal solution for most consumers. Now, moving forwards, I'm really excited to get back to Utah in the next couple of weeks, as I do have a new downhill bike that's going to be much smaller than this single crown build meant for tricks. It's all delivered at the house and ready to be built up. So that's some really exciting content to come. But thank you so much for watching this week's video. I hope that there were some good takeaways for you in this FRS bike check, and we'll catch you in the next upload. Peace.